Kia ora koutou and welcome everyone to another video of PhD to Professional. And today I'm really pleased to have Richard with us today, who's going to share with us about his story. Richard, over to you.
Hi, nice to meet you, Sherrie. Thank you for having me on this. It's really exciting. Um, do I dive right in with my story?
Well,
And
why don't you give us a little bit of introduction about where you did your PhD? What did you do your PhD in?
so my PhD was in mechanical engineering. So my undergrad was mechatronics, sort of like robotics, and then the PhD was how you bring together lots of different people around the world to build today's really complex products. So the title was Collaboration in New Product Development. Um, and it was, even though it was under the mechanical banner, it kind of ended up being more of a sort of social sciences PhD because it was about people. How do you get people to work together en masse and build some of the really, really hard things that people are building today? So that was really fascinating, and that was a lot of sort of action research being embedded in lots of different companies, lots of case studies, and yeah, got me a really interesting perspective on how all these different companies work and don't work, which I found fascinating and spent many years on. Yeah, so that was my PhD. Took a bit longer than normal because I was doing action research in those companies and had jobs. And at the same time, I also started a company with some of my friends while doing the PhD called ecoPortal, which has now grown to about 100 people, I think. So when I left, probably about 4 years ago, it was 20 people. But that was a long journey as well, starting up a company while doing a PhD, while working in other companies. And yeah, definitely a busy time and an interesting time.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. So you did your PhD,
Yeah.
you were working, you had to work with lots of other people doing action research, so that took longer than 3 or 4 years, I gather.
Yeah, I think it was 7 at the end of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you started on a company, so lots of things to unpack. So let's just take it one at a time. Perhaps to start off, what were you thinking when you wanted to do your PhD? What were your aspirations?
So my aspirations at the time were that I mean, I think everyone, when they were doing their undergrad, I remember this day, they were all dressed up in suits and they're all going to go try and get a job at Fisher and Paykel. And I just didn't want to do that. That wasn't for me. And so at the same time, one of my supervisors said, do you want to do a master's in, trying to remember what it was back then. It was, because it's changed so many times. The PhD is a winding journey. So this is going back 20 years ago. It was around design communication. So, how do you get designs from the design office all the way through? And it ended up being around mass customization. So basically embedding the customer in the design process. Um, so we said, do you want to do a master's in this? And I thought, yeah, because I don't want to go to job interviews right now. That just seems like a bit of me. And then transitioned that into a PhD. And while doing that PhD, everyone in that group, it was a research group of about 12 of us, we're all embedded in different companies. And a lot of us decided, hey, why don't we commercialize our research rather than just building research that ends up in a thesis that no one ever sees again? Why not try and make a business out of it? So at the start, my aspirations, they were all around, turning my research into either a product, a consulting product, or some sort of physical, well, not physical, digital sort of product that I would then be able to, take out and actually um, commercialize and have people get value from, because it's quite hard when you're doing a PhD and you're just, thinking the only person that's ever going to read this is my supervisor and my mum, if I'm lucky. You really want it to go a bit further. And so, yeah, commercialization is a great way for that to happen. So that was, yeah, one of the ways that I really wanted to, see all the work that I was putting in, come out to something and mean something.
That's
Um,
great. So obviously so my background's in social sciences, so that's quite unusual from the context that I'm in. Is it common from, I guess, the engineering industry or the kinds of industries that you're working with? Was it common to see PhD projects turned into something more commercial?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I'm just trying to think. There was one Stretch Sense that turned out to be a large sort of company. I think there's quite a few in the space sort of industry. I didn't realize this, but now there's a space tech division of Auckland University, and I've talked to some other people that have developed sensors for different things. And it was quite popular. I think we had this department called Uni Services, and they were all about turning, IP developed during postgrad research into commercial products. And there was also this really good program called Spark. I think they're renamed. I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but it was a 10-week program to take your idea and give it a go at commercialization. And we went through that program, and that was really good. That was probably the time when we sort of realized that, hey, what we're working on does have legs. So let's try and do something with it. So yeah.
Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about what helped you transition from a PhD environment? Clearly, you're doing research and working in the industry, but moving from that quite focused research environment to stepping out, and you mentioned you had your own business and launching your own firm. What was that like?
Yeah, so I mean, I was really lucky that my research group embedded us in companies. So we literally had a desk and a role at these different companies. So for half the week at the start of my PhD, I was at this company called Criterion Furniture, which has gone away now, but was the largest flat pack furniture manufacturer in Australasia for a while, kind of like IKEA, uh, pumping out around 500,000 pieces of furniture every year. So I had a desk there in this nice office, and I went there and then worked as the mass customization project manager, and then taking notes and memoing, and then in the evenings trying to develop a theory around all of that, and then the rest of the week I was at university. So I lived in two worlds. And then I got a job at a place called Nextbase, which is essentially a company that deals with sort of 3D visualization of cities and large data sets. And I got a paid job there, and so I was there 5 days a week. Also doing action research, because the only difference between doing normal work and research is if you have a method to record what's going on and then observe and try and pull out patterns and ideas. So I was very closely linked to industry while doing my PhD, and that seemed like a really good way of doing things, because at both places I was offered full-time jobs, and I said, no, I don't want to do it all the time, because I am still trying to do a PhD, and at the same time we also had a startup going on, so I was stretched a bit thin, but it wasn't so much of a transition as that I was already deeply in the commercialization sort of world. Uh, yeah, so I mean, part of that, I guess, if people aren't already doing that, is if you have research that you're doing, sort of look around for companies that might find that useful. The way I got the job in the second company was that I thought that seemed like a really cool company I'd like to work for. And so I wrote essentially what was a manifesto on my thoughts on what they were doing, created a magazine, like high quality print of it, and then sent it to them. And they really liked, where I was coming from and my thoughts around it, and how it integrated with my research. And then we talked about me having a position there. So, I mean, you can create your own opportunities in those ways. It's just about thinking about where you want to work and how what you're currently researching fits in with that, and creating your own path.
Thanks for that. I think I really liked how you talked about In the first instance, your research wasn't abstract, it was grounded, it was situated, it was practical. I was literally in a company, for a company, to help the company, not just one, but two. And that you sort of took the initiative to say, well, I've got something that's worth talking about and it's worth sharing. And it was. And perhaps I'm wondering if you could comment on, now that you've got your own business, how would you react to a PhD student coming to you with their idea?
So we did at ecoPortal have lots of different people come in. So we had lots of interns. We were very closely linked to the university. So we had lots of people coming in and ran lots of different projects. And that was very hit and miss from the perspective that, sometimes these things work and sometimes they don't. But it's about giving people a shot and seeing how it works. And it ended up being that one of our key developers who became our CTO was doing a master's in our company. And then we're like, this guy's amazing. We have to keep him. And so we gave him some share ownership of the company. And then he finished his PhD and became, not PhD, his master's, and became a full-time employee of the company. So yeah, I think it's a very important link having that, that tie between university and business. And always happy to give back. The moment I am a solo entrepreneur working on another software company, so it's just me at the moment. But when I start bringing on more people, yeah, definitely interested in talking to people from the university that are doing research, because it's just an untapped resource. Not completely untapped. There are, a lot of people that do bring in PhDs and people doing their masters and even undergraduates doing internships. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of value to be derived there, and I really believe strongly in having close ties between university and business.
I think you were talking about how, their research projects or the things they're working on could ultimately prove to be useful for companies. I wonder if you could talk about other qualities or skills that PhD students bring. So apart from the research topic, and through your own experience, what would you say are transferable skills from what you learned through your PhD, and may I say, the real world?
I think pretty much all PhDs are undercover entrepreneurs for a few reasons. One is the audacity for doing a PhD, just saying, hey, no, I'm not gonna join the workforce. I'm gonna spend another 4 years studying some very specific area and come up with some new knowledge. I think that takes a mindset that is a bit different. And I think that's a similar mindset to what shakes people out of, doing a job and starting their own thing. Um, Also tenacity. It takes a lot of effort to do a PhD. You have to stay focused for a long time. I've heard a lot of stories about people, crying while writing their thesis, and I think that's probably a pretty common story. Trying to churn out that amount of stuff and that amount of time, uh, and it's a winding journey. There's no straight path. Well, there generally isn't. If someone had a straight path in their PhD, I think you probably got very lucky, and I'd love to hear about it. Mine was definitely very winding, and that's the same with building a business. It's a very winding journey, and you need to sort of hang in there. It's very, very rare for a company to get it right first time, and you need to, have that resilience. And so I think that people that have done a PhD or are doing a PhD, naturally have to have that resilience, or they wouldn't be doing it, or they wouldn't be doing it for very long. So there's a lot of character traits that I feel are very similar there. Also, being a little bit smart to have got to that point. Generally, I'm not saying all PhDs are smart. Some of it you just hang in there for 7 years and eventually you get your PhD. But yeah, you have to be able to write and all of those kind of things, which is an important part of being able to sell yourself and do all of that kind of thing. And the last sort of aspect, uh, come back to that one in a second. I'll just check. I had one more, and I've had a flu for the last 2 weeks, and my brain is not firing on all cylinders. So let me just come
No
back to that one.
problem. Yeah, no, I mean, if we have a little bit a longer chat, that might come to you. I guess one of the things that a lot of PhDs are thinking about right now is the very, very challenging job market. Not just for PhD students, anyone just looking for a job. Perhaps if you've got some tips to share from what you've experienced in terms of going from a PhD qualification, taking it to potential employers, or starting your own business, and any other thoughts or advice you might have for those sort of getting into it, finishing up.
Yeah, you're incredibly networked during your PhD. There are tons of resources. If you haven't got any, or you don't know what I'm talking about, just have a look around. So if you're in a research group, or there are research groups around, chatting to people there, there's lots of meetups, all that kind of thing. Like if you're a computer web developer, or if you're in the social sciences, or there's meetups for everything. There's also angel investors that invest in companies. They're always happy to have a chat. There's so many networks out there. You just need to tap into a few and just sort of understand what's out there. If you have no idea about networks, try talking to ChatGPT for a while. That's actually really good at telling you networks in your sort of area that you're interested in. So it's more about sort of planning what you want. If you understand what sort of companies you want to work for, or that kind of thing, then you can start sort of plotting a course for those. And I mean, as I mentioned before, you know, finding some people in those companies, crafting a story about, how you think and why you think you'd be great for that company, and letting them know that, you've been doing research in this area, and you'd love to have a chat with them, and then see what comes out of that. So yeah, I think just looking for jobs on job sites and that kind of stuff, I don't feel is the complete way to go. You can, make your own sort of path a little bit in these ways. Network with people, and find other ways, alternative ways in. Because I mean, you have been doing PhD research in a very specific area. If you want to bring that research to light, there's probably only a few places that can do that. So either find those places and connect with those people, or go it alone and try and figure out, another path. Talk to angel investors and talk about how you could potentially commercialize this. There's often funds and that kind of thing that will give you a certain amount of money to develop a business plan, and then go that path. Once you've got the business plan and you get a few other people that are interested, and you can get some funding, then before you know it, you're building your own business around your research. So don't just think about finding a job that's slightly related or adjacent to what you're working on, because those are few and far between. But be a little bit more conscious of where you want to end up, and you'll be surprised about what sort of opportunities start appearing when you start reaching out and joining those networks, and yeah, thinking about these things with a more sort of focused mindset.
Thanks, Richard. I think you've pointed out one of the key things when it comes to finding work, not just any job really, but along a longer journey of discovery, what you want, planning. I couldn't agree more. Networks are the way to go. You have to find your tribe, if you've heard the phrase before, and start to build a sense of who you might want to work for, and starting to find out who are those people. And I really love your bold approach. I really like your magazine idea, sort of you publish a magazine, and I guess who could resist a glossy spread?
Yeah, full of pictures. Yeah, just little blurbs that sound really insightful. Don't need to cover the whole thing with text, or it will never get read. But yeah, pictures and a few little blurbs, and you'll be surprised how well that goes down and situates you for a chat. And yeah, before you know it, you might have a couple of champions in the company that are begging the CEO that you need to be they need to be working with you. So yeah, I mean, never underestimate the power of making a few internal connections and sharing your thought process and how you can add value to a specific company.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for sharing so much about your journey. Really great insights. I don't usually speak to people that are out of my domain, and certainly, visit electronics, mechatronics, engineering. Sorry, they all kind of mean the same thing to me, just not my.
Yeah.
But it's really refreshing to know that because you work in that domain, there's so many industry connections, and for people who are working in that area, not to forget that is where a pathway lies, and that is yours for the taking if you wanted it and if you planned for it. So thanks so much, Richard. Thanks everyone for joining us, and perhaps we'll chat to Richard more when he does hire his next PhD graduate.
Definitely. Yeah, no, always happy for a chat. If anyone wants to talk more, or talk about commercialization of an idea or anything like that, yeah, happy to have a coffee.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.